All right, everybody. So today we are in Stockton, California at King Island Mobile Home Park. This is where I grew up. Lived here from age 7 to 16. And while it has definitely changed pretty dramatically over the last 20 years, there's a lot out here that still is very, very similar. So it brings back some childhood memories and nostalgia. Um, Makes me remember some wild stories, some good, some bad. But it's pretty cool being out here again after all this time. And also just thinking about the perception that comes with living in a mobile home park. You know, you're perceived a certain way, good or bad. And now, over the last 20 years and getting involved more in real estate, I've had the opportunity to acquire a couple of mobile home parks. And so now, living through the perception of what it means to own a few mobile home parks, it's just interesting to compare and contrast those. So, speaking of compare and contrast, today we're going to talk about why I think mobile home parks are a far superior investment compared to apartment buildings. So, a year and a half ago, I had a commercial building that went through a fire, and I needed to move that money back into another piece of real estate to avoid capital gains and taxation, etc. So, when I was looking at different real estate investment opportunities, I initially looked at apartment complexes. And what I found was there's wild demand, right? There's so many people looking to invest in apartment buildings that the margins just were really tight. And so here in Northern California, they were priced around a 4 to 5 cap rate. Um, and so I wasn't 100% sold on like executing that. And so I started looking at other options. Mobile home parks are close to an apartment building. They're different, but I would say they're the closest. And obviously, me growing up in a mobile home park, I had, some emotional tie back to that. So I started looking at mobile home parks. And what I found was where an apartment building was trading at like a 4 to 5 cap rate, I was able to buy a mobile home park similar price and step into a 6 or 7 cap rate. And not only was I able to step into a slightly higher cap rate, but I was able to also have the opportunity through some value add to take that return from a 6 or 7 to 10, 11, or 12 in a fairly short period of time. And I didn't feel like that was possible at all with the apartment buildings that I was looking at. So, just face value, I immediately saw that mobile home parks appeared to be far superior in the overall upside in building equity. Um, the second thing that I want to talk about is how to find mobile home parks. So it's much easier to find an apartment building for sale. Apartment buildings are listed on LoopNet, CoStar, like everything that's on market is probably going to be listed there, and so it's really easy to find them. They're all centrally located. Okay, mobile home parks, on the other hand, are not. So there are going to be mobile home parks for sale that you'll be able to find on LoopNet, but there's all sorts of mobile home parks that are for sale that are only listed on these obscure mobile home park brokerage websites. And so it's just much more decentralized. And so that takes a little more digging to find those opportunities. So when I was going through that process and I'm looking at mobile home parks all throughout the United States, I recognized that if I was looking in Iowa or Alabama or Florida, Mississippi, I kept seeing a similar name representing all these different parks throughout the United States. And as I looked at the company's information, I realized they're only like 45 minutes away from where I live here in California. And so I reached out to them, even though none of the parks that they had listed really fit my criteria. I was still curious. And so I reached out to them, ended up speaking to the broker. His name was Robert. He'd been in the mobile home park space for 25 years. He's got all kinds of crazy stories. And he and I hit it off really well. And we started kind of chatting. We ended up going to have lunch together. I explained to him what I was looking for and ended up buying two mobile home parks with his help. And they were both off market opportunities. And the only way that those came to me was because I went out, made a phone call, networked with an individual in that space, and then was able to leverage finding two off market properties that way. The third mobile home park that we just purchased, I did find online. Wasn't on LoopNet. It was on, again, one of those obscure websites. So I found it there, and I'll go through the details of that with you right now. So property's out in Presque Isle, Maine. It's about, Maine already is as northeast of the country as it's going to get, and Presque Isle is about as northeast of Maine as you're going to get. So very remote, only about 15,000 people that live in the community. But I had a chance to fly out there last year and just really fell in love with the town. And mind you, it was summer-ish time, so I don't know if I'd be in love with the town of Northeast Maine in January, but in summer, it was great. And people were super friendly, everybody was really nice, and they were struggling, that community is struggling with a housing crisis, housing shortage, just like all sorts of other communities are across the country. And so we were able to pick up an 85 pad park for $1.15 million. The seller needed to get the property sold faster than we were able to get a loan structured through a bank. So we ended up putting 800 down. He seller carried $350,000 so we could get the transaction done. And he agreed to seller carry that for only 90 days. So it's a very short period of time. So it was like the pressure cooker to go out and find a lender that was willing to work with us and help us with long-term structured debt. Fortunately, we found a lender that sent over a term sheet. Terms were good. And when we got the appraisal done, the appraisal actually came back so much higher that the lender was willing to loan $1,090,000 on the park, which left only $60,000 in. So when we bought the park for 1.15, lender's willing to loan $1,090,000. We pretty much got all of our money back. So paid the seller note off and almost got all of our money back. And that park generates $18,000 a month in gross income. It's got $4,500 a month on average of expenses. We now have an $8,500 debt service payment, but what's left is $5,000 free cash flow and 40-ish units that we can infill to increase cash flow, because it's an 85 pad park, but there was only about 44 spaces that were currently occupied. And now you might say to yourself, well, Zach, if they're having a housing crisis, how is there 41 vacant spots available? Well, it's because there's different strategies when it comes to infilling mobile home parks. So the current owner or the previous owner's strategy was he wanted tenants to buy units, bring in their own mobile home bring in their own mobile home and then just rent the lot. It's not a bad strategy, but it creates a massive barrier for entry. There's far fewer people that either have the means, ability, or desire to buy a mobile home for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 and then put it in a park. So our strategy is different. Our strategy is we will go out and buy the mobile home, we'll put it in the park, and then list it for rent just like you would an apartment or any other rental, okay? And so in working with the community leaders out there in Presque Isle, they all felt like that would be a much faster way to infill those remaining 40 vacant units. So that's our plan over the next 2 years, is to just continue to bring in mobile homes and then rent them out to the tenants that are there. Our strategy is over the next 2 years to get to about 80% occupancy. And at 80% occupancy, the increased gross rents and income that comes along with that would then translate the value of that property from 1.15 to almost $3 million. So to be able to go from 1.15 to $3 million on 2 years, while during that time having free cash flow come from that investment, there's not very many apartment complexes that I found that were able to do anything close to that. And so all that said, I just think hands down, mobile home parks, again, contrasted to apartment buildings, hands down the winner. If you're considering investing in mobile home parks, here's the first actionable step you need to take. Just find the deal, okay? So go online, go to those obscure mobile home park websites, also go to LoopNet too, find a deal that you think makes sense, that hits the parameters that you're looking for. And that's step number one. So if you found this video valuable, go ahead and click subscribe, click the notification bell. So as we release more content like this, you can take advantage of this information that we're going to be releasing. And also, if you have any questions, Comment below. I'd love to answer those questions that you guys have, or let me know what you think, mobile home parks or apartment buildings.